So thank you all so much for coming. My name is Sophia. I am the internship director with Debris Free Oceans. So basically I just oversee a bunch of college students that are working to engage and educate the community aligned with DFO's goals. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about that. And you're here tonight for the Eco Fashion Workshop, so hopefully you're in the right Zoom. We have a few lovely panelists that are here to talk about sustainable fashion and the different initiatives that they're working on. So just before we start talking about all things fashion and sustainability, just a couple of housekeeping things that we just like to encourage in the beginning of all of these virtual events. Definitely feel free to turn your cameras on. We would love to see your faces and love to kind of keep up that regular engagement that we miss so dearly from in-person events. But if you don't mind keeping yourself muted, just so we can have the focus be on the speakers while they're talking, so the camera can like spotlight them and all of that. But you are so welcome to drop any questions you have in the chat and write them in there. Also, just another thing, this workshop will be recorded and posted on Instagram TV. We also have it being recorded to Facebook Live right now. We're streaming. So if you feel uncomfortable having your face recorded, just keep that in mind. But yeah, so that's just kind of all of those logistics. And then this is just the overall outline of the event. Again, my name's Sophia. I'm going to talk a little bit about plastic pollution and the fashion industry and how that relates, and also just introduce Debris Free Oceans. And then we have lovely, lovely speakers with Colleen from The Full Edit, Anna from UThrift, and Laura from Waterlust. And after all of these amazing presenters, we're going to be having a Kahoot quiz and a giveaway. So definitely stay through towards the end for that, and also just to hear these amazing women speak about sustainable fashion, of course. And then just before we get started, if everyone wants to just drop in the chat where they're tuning in from, this is just something that we've seen happen at a couple different events, and we're just curious to see. DFO, we're personally located in South Florida, but we've had attendees from all over. And then also, if you want to just shout out any groups or organizations that either you know of that are going to be presenting today, or you're a part of in some way, definitely give them a little shout out, show them some love. All right, I'm looking at the chats. Amazing, lots in Miami. Ooh, Oregon. Yeah, all over. Awesome. Oh, these connections, amazing. Cool, so we're gonna have that going. So hopefully as people come in, they'll do the same. But that's just all of the logistical things about this event. And now just to share a little bit of background about Debris Free Oceans. If you don't know us, we're a 501c3 nonprofit. We're local to South Florida, mainly Miami, doing a lot of engagement for our main mission of eradicating the ocean of marine debris. Those are all the glasses I have drying in my room. So we work for that mission, and we do that in a few different ways. So anything, pre-COVID regarding scuba cleanups, engaging keg and cleans where we have a little bit of beer, have a little bit of kombucha, and also just do a little good in cleaning up the beach. We also work on education, so having presentations at schools, local groups, talking about plastic pollution and just how people can be a part of and support solutions. We also try to support local policies in our area and help businesses transition away from single-use plastics. So that's just like a little bit of overview. We try to dabble in a lot of different things. And now, given COVID-19, we focus a lot on having virtual events. So being events like this, where we focus on different topics such as environmental justice, composting, sustainable gardens, and now sustainable fashion. So that's just like a little bit of what we do and what we love to do. And now that I've spoken a little bit about us, just an introduction into single-use plastics and kind of why this is at such a big core of our mission. So this is a picture of the Milky Way galaxy. In 2015, scientists actually estimated that there are over 400 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy. And they also estimated that 13 times that amount, so 13 times 400 billion, is the amount of pieces of plastic in the ocean. So that's 5.25 trillion pieces of plastic. And this was 2015, so about 5 years ago. And we know that this number has just increased very drastically since then. So just kind of a background at exactly the scale of the problem we're looking at here. When we think of single-use plastic, you know, traditionally we think of items like cups, bottles, things like that, but in this case it can also mean clothing. So that's just something that we'll get into a little bit now. But first off, kind of the quality of plastics that makes them so pervasive in these environments is that they're basically built to last forever. Plastics are oil-based, so petroleum, and they are created out of these chemicals, and therefore they're very different in composition from something like an apple core or something that is made out of natural products that could actually like break down and biodegrade. We don't like to say that plastics break down, they just break apart over time. So with elements such as like rain, heat, water again, and just over time, they'll break apart into smaller and smaller pieces, which are traditionally known as like microplastics. But basically all piece of plastic that has ever been created still exists in the world today in some form. So that's a very unfortunate statistic and quality of them. You know, traditionally it could mean that they last a really long time, which in the beginning was, you know, a good thing to have something durable, but something that is polluting our environment, you know, harming sea life, harming animals. It's kind of a little scary that it lasts for so long. So that's about plastics. And now you may wonder, like, how does this exactly connect to clothing? Well, when we think about clothing, usually we think about fibers, you know, textiles, but in a lot of the case, when we're producing single-use plastics and extracting oil, we also use some of that oil to produce clothes. So again, non-renewable resource oil, and then that produces clothes such as polyester, nylon, acrylic, all of these synthetic materials that will then last again for lifetimes and hundreds of years. So throughout the lifetime of, let's say, like a polyester t-shirt, we have the emissions from actually collecting that oil, from producing it, you know, having the factories running them, from use. So when you have a shirt, obviously you wash it at some point. And in that case, for synthetic materials, that means microfibers enter the ocean, which is something we'll be going in depth a little bit more later. And then also after use. So when clothes pile up in a landfill, they all emit greenhouse gases throughout every single stage of this life cycle. So it's just important to keep in mind. And then again, just talking about the specifics of synthetic materials, when we think about just the overall life cycle of these items, we're increasing our consumption and demand for these very cheap clothing goods, which, you know, causes a big toll on the environment when we're now predicted by 2050 to want to consume 300 million tons of oil every year just to produce clothing. And then to kind of go into the other aspect of it, a big driver of this is, of course, the affordability of these very cheap products such as polyester, nylon, again, those synthetic materials that are made out of that oil production. So now actually since the 2000s, we are now brands are actually purchasing clothes twice as much as they were before 2000. So we know that this amount is just increasing exponentially, and very similar to like a single-use plastic bottle, because they're so cheap and so poorly made, they're needed to be replaced over time. And that creates that kind of single-use mindset that overlaps here. So that's all that I will be introducing for tonight. Next, we have Colleen, who's going to talk a little bit more about how we can actually, you know, take advantage of having all of these textiles and all of these products and really reusing them and making them last lifetimes. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and allow her to share hers. Hopefully that wasn't too boring so far.
That was awesome. Thanks so much, Sophia. And great statistics you got going on there. Let me just share this screen really quick, and I think it's going to just segue into what you were talking about. So let me just give you a quick introduction. I'm Colleen Coughlin of The Full Edit. I'm a former designer from New York City at Victoria's Secret when it was cool. It's not anymore. But I left Victoria's Secret because we literally had to get trash day. And as Elizabeth Tran and all my DFO girls already know, I left because when we were talking about all this, being a big company like Limited Brands, people wanted to sell us fabric, sell us findings, and sell us trims. And what ended up happening is just a bunch of that would end up like accumulating around the office. So on this Get Trash Day, there was about 15, 12 by 5 by 3 bins where we cleaned out our desk spaces and closets, and it just threw it away. And so what happened was all this extra stuff was just being discarded. And when I asked if we could donate it to a school or someone else to reuse or an artisan, they said no because of legal reasons. That's a whole nother story, but it just really changed my mentality of working in the fashion industry, which was fast fashion. And so I'm just gonna share the screen here. One second. And then, okay. So we're gonna do this one first. Do you guys see the number of wears? Yep. Okay, thanks, Maddie. Okay, so for here, I just want you guys to kind of think of, so in any company that's large scale like L Brands, what they end up doing is they buy volume of things. So instead of buying, a beautiful piece of one garment for $100, they'll buy like 20,000 units and sell it for $10. What they end up doing is buying all this stuff, having all this extra leftover that ends up getting thrown away, thrown off, or deeply discounted. And it just continues with the cycle of overconsumption. So what I always like to share with my clients, because I go in and I edit their closets and teach them how to buy less, choose well, the whole Vivienne Westwood mentality, I like to talk about the price per wear. So let's just say if you take your little black dress, let's say you pay $100 for it. If you divide that by 4 times a year, $25 a wear. $10 a year, $10, or 10 times a year, $10 a wear. 30 times a year, you're at like almost pi. So I always like to tell people, like,
that promotes conscious consumerism and slow fashion. So essentially how we work is that we accept any lightly used clothing, shoes, accessories, school supplies, basically anything that's in good condition. And then if you want to come and shop with us at any time, you can receive 1 free item, even without a donation. However, if you do bring a donation, you receive 1 bonus item. So for example, if you were to come and donate 5 items, you would get 6 items for free. And the purpose of UThrift is to promote sustainable practices and redistribute existing goods into both the local Miami and the UM communities. UThrift provides a free thrifting platform that aims to mitigate both the environmental and social effects of the fast fashion industry. And at the end of every month, UThrift donates its excess inventory to local charities around the Miami area. So we talked a lot about fast and slow fashion, and basically the goal of UThrift is to promote slow fashion over fast fashion, promoting ethical, sustainable, efficient, local, recyclable ways of wearing clothes versus unethical practices which often exploit workers and have more environmental impacts. So Sophia touched on this a little bit, but we do like to talk about what's in our clothes when you buy clothes from fast fashion industries. So we found that there's over 8,000 chemicals that are used in textile production, and these include dyes and pigments, anti-shrinking agents, plasticizers, flame retardants, stabilizers, stiffening agents, and so many more. And about 65% of clothing are made out of those synthetic materials. So what you're wearing and what you go see at the store, 65% of that is made from unnatural materials versus the rest is made from things like cotton and wool and other natural materials. And then beyond what's in our clothes, the thrifting era talks a lot about clothing waste. So the average piece of clothing is actually only reworn 3 to 7 times. And it's shown that Americans only wear about 20% of what's found in their closet. So the world consumes about 80 billion new pieces of clothing every year, which is 400% more than it was 2 decades ago. And the average American generates 82 pounds of textile waste every single year. So UThrift essentially is just promoting wearing your own clothes and swapping instead of buying new clothing. So we talk a lot about fast fashion accountability and who we should hold accountable for our actions of clothing. And of course, like a lot of it has to do with infrastructure and companies in the industry, because about 9.5% of the US's solid waste comes from the industries. And what we're working to prove and show is that those industries should hold 4 main principles. The first is the precautionary principle, which is preventing the negative outcome of the fast fashion industry. The second is the environmental sustainability principle, which is that sustainable production that does not deplete resources or negatively impact the environment. The third is the environmental justice principle, which is ensuring ethical practices in clothing production. And the fourth is polluter pays principle, which is holding companies accountable financially for the environmental damage that their industry and their products create. But then, of course, we also have to put a little bit of the blame on ourselves and the consumer market. So I have this graphic here that you can't see, but it's a hierarchy of needs, and it's basically a pyramid structure. And so on the bottom, which is like the most important, is to use what you have. Above that is to borrow. Above that is swap. And then above that is thrift, and then make, and then buy clothes as a last resort. But in better news, slow fashion is on the rise. The resale industry is currently worth $24 billion, and it's expected to reach $51 billion by 2023. And this increase is actually 21 times faster than the classic retail has increased over the past 3 years, which just shows that people do know about the resale industry and they're willing to work towards buying more things from them. About 64% of American women buy and are willing to buy secondhand clothing, and 1 in 3 Gen Zers bought secondhand in 2019. And of course, if you're looking to thrift and you're looking for a place to start, of course, we would encourage you to support UThrift. You can shop with us every Wednesday on UM's campus. You can donate almost anything you have in good condition and receive free clothes in return. And then, of course, you can always watch for our upcoming virtual and in-person events and connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. And our Instagram is UM_UThrift if you wanted to check us out and see what we're doing this semester.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna. And we'll be, again, sharing all the slides and everyone's accounts and resources at the end. So you guys can see all the slides and all the graphics that she was referring to.
Yeah, I'm going to send out a compiled PowerPoint. And yeah, Colleen, if you want to speak again too, you're more than welcome to give it another go. I think they're gone. But yeah, thank you, Anna, too.
And yeah, of course, if anyone has questions too, feel free to drop them in the chat. But Laura, if you want to get started and talk about Waterlust.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I'm Laura, and I'm with Waterlust. We're, I guess, going to offer a little bit of a different perspective compared to the last 2 speakers, because we kind of come from the apparel brand side. So a little bit different from the resale and the remaking of existing products. But so Waterlust is a company that we make environmentally friendly products that are designed and inspired by marine science research and education. And we basically take these products that are inspired by marine life and we give back 10% of profits to research and education. So we actually started as a film and photography company. We weren't actually even in the apparel space at our core. I actually used to work in New York and I worked in sourcing and design, but I came down to kind of transition Waterlust from what it used to be, which was a film and photography platform, into more of an apparel brand. And the reason we did that is because we thought that clothing could be a perfect tool to share environmental conservation knowledge. I mean, with clothing, you can basically have it be a first impression for anyone that you meet. It can be a tool to reflect your values, to tell people about the things that you're interested in, about the things that you care about. So it can be a form of expression and a way to start up conversations. So with that, we created what we now call advocate apparel. And basically that concept is the meeting of fashion and science communication. So we use clothing as a scientific communication tool where, like I mentioned, each clothing item is inspired by a marine science related topic and is designed to be attention grabbing and a conversation starter. And so then you can walk around and educate anyone that you interact with about the clothing item that you're wearing. So like I mentioned, for each print, we partner with a different research lab or education group or nonprofit that is doing relevant research in the field. So we have a whale shark print, for example, that gives back to Marine Megafauna Foundation, a sea turtle print that gives back to the Florida State University, sailfish print that gives back to the Billfish Foundation, tiger shark print, and then some more like atmospheric ones. We do a Florida Springs print that gives back to the Alachua Conservation Trust. So we right now have 11 different conservation topics, and that's constantly growing. So I encourage you to check them out. I have them on my slides, but I don't think I'll be sharing those. So beyond the clothing, we share the conservation knowledge primarily through the clothing, but also all the knowledge that we gather from our partners, we share in a variety of other ways, including the product web pages that have all the different information about the species that the topic's inspired by and basically how you can help that species. And then digital newsletters that come to you after you purchase a product. So for example, if you were to buy a whale shark legging, we would send you a flow of emails that teach you more about whale sharks so that you can spread on that knowledge to other people. And then another thing we recently started doing is sending information postcards, which again, I have a picture of, that then have action items that you can take in your day-to-day life to help each of these marine science topics or animals or species. And then because it's in a postcard format, you can just slap a stamp on it and add an address and then send it on to a friend that you think might want to know about that research topic. And then we ship these products and information all over the world to over 100 countries. So our hope is that as it spreads across the world and from person to person, that this knowledge is also spreading in the same way. But how do we make our products? Obviously, that's extremely important. As we've already mentioned countless times, the fashion industry is one of the largest polluters in the world. They create a lot of products and a lot of waste. So the truth is that manufacturing anything, whether it's clothing, you know, pens, anything that you make comes at a cost. And as a company that our mission, the forefront of our mission is to protect the environment, it seems like somewhat of a catch-22 that we're going to then manufacture clothing. So we look really closely at the way that we do things in order to stay true to our values. And the four main principles that we try to abide by when we're looking at designing a new product is, one, to only create products that serve a fundamental purpose. A fundamental purpose, meaning that it's important in your day-to-day life. You know, it's really going to help you out. All of our products are UPF 50 plus, so they'll protect you from the sun the way that another garment maybe could not. Synthetics just have natural sun protection properties that you can't always find. Like in a cotton shirt, for example, the average UPF is 15. So you won't get the same sun protection as you would in a synthetic garment. So obviously there's pros and cons to everything, and I'm going to touch on that a lot. But only creating fundamental products that serve a necessary function is really at the root. So that's number one. And then two, obviously create these products with the smallest environmental footprint possible. So that's complicated and difficult to define, and I'll touch on that a little bit more shortly, how we define exactly the lowest environmental impact possible. And then three, a product is never finished. So even though we are an apparel brand. I don't think it would be a popular thing to say in the apparel brand space, but we don't really believe in fast fashion at Waterlust. All the products that we make, we say a product is never finished. So that's our number 3 fundamental value. Once we've designed something, we don't just wipe it clean. We're not just done with it. We'll keep that product living on forever. So we started designing products about 5 years ago, and those first prints still exist on our website. And we've since tweaked a lot of things about them. We've made some small print tweaks. We've made some pattern tweaks. You know, we've added pockets. We've done some design things. But then we're also always looking at the environmental footprint and how we can change and adapt as things go along. And while we might feel like at the time doing something was the best possible way we could have done it, we're always learning and growing and adapting and trying to pivot. And then finally, transparency is key. So always be transparent and open and invite dialogue and honesty with our customers and our community. You know, we want to learn from other people. So we're always open to discussion and to talking to people about, you know, how we came up with the reasoning that we did for designing the products that we've designed. So back to evaluating the product's environmental footprint and kind of how we evaluate how we're going to do that. We kind of look at it sort of similar to what Sophia mentioned from a birth, life, and death approach. And we think, you know, manufacturing things it's super complicated. It's difficult to look at anything from just one perspective because there's so many different ways that a piece of clothing can have an impact. So if you look at just one little issue, you can get hung up on that, but we like to look at it from the whole to try and make sure that as a whole, we're trying to reduce our impact as much as possible. So birth being the resources required to produce the garment, basically anything it takes to make it. So that would be like carbon emissions, water usage, agricultural land use, that kind of thing. And then the product's life. And that's really like how well and how long the garment will last. Like the other speakers have obviously touched on this. If you're only going to wear it once or twice, it's going to have a really large life impact. But if you can wear it over and over and over again and it lasts a lot longer, then that is obviously going to help reduce the environmental impact of its life. And then, of course, death, the morbid death. That describes what happens to your clothes when you're done with them. So obviously we look here at biodegradability and recyclability and what you can do when you've decided that you're done with the clothing. So we make a variety of different products. A lot of them are our printed items. And then we also make some other things like t-shirts and hoodies. And for each product that we make, we look at this environmental impact life cycle and evaluate that product in a different way. So while one product we may decide we want to manufacture a certain way, we might decide we want to do it a different way for another product. And with that, so a lot of our printed products we do make out of recycled polyester. So we choose to use synthetic garments because our products are designed to be worn in and out of the water. And to us, performance and that life aspect is a really important factor to our products. So basically, the polyester is, it's super durable. It keeps its shape retention. It has the UPF 50+. It has all these necessary needs in order to be able to be worn in and out of the water. Whereas something like a cotton garment, which we do use in like our t-shirts and our hoodies where you might not be wearing in and out of the water, won't keep that same shape retention that you might have in a polyester garment. But we choose to use recycled polyester, as again, we've touched on a little bit. There's a ton and an abundance of resources out there. Globally, humans buy an estimated of 1 million plastic bottles per minute, and less than 10% of those are ever recycled. So that's 91% that are ending up either in our oceans or our landfills. And then scientists estimate about 8 million metric tons enter the oceans every year. So with all of those bottles that don't have another home, we figured we might as well use those existing resources and turn them into something new. So I would show you my graphic of how the products exactly are made, but basically we take bottles and we sort them and wash them and then chop them into flake and then put them into a chip that is then melted and extruded into a long filament yarn that's then woven into our fabric and then cut and sewn and printed. And so for our printing method, we use dye sublimation printing, and this we're able to use because it's a synthetic garment. To dye them, we basically convert a dye molecule directly from a solid to a gaseous state, and then we don't have to do the liquid state in between. So the benefit of this is that we use 0 water, and so there's no dye runoff and there's no like toxic dyes entering into our waterways, no ground contamination, that kind of thing. And then we are also able to just dye each of the pattern pieces of the garment. So we're able to reduce the ink waste by not dyeing yard to yard, just dyeing exactly where we need to. And then that print method is completely UV, salt, and chlorine resistant, so your garment will last a really, really long time. And then we also, so like I said, we look at every step of the way. And so when the product is going to manufacturing, we're always looking at it from every direction of our supply chain. So when we cut the garment, we try and already squeeze all the pattern pieces as close as we can in together on the fabric. We are always going to be left over with little pieces that don't fit. And this waste, basically, these little pieces, the scraps, end up unused, and it's estimated that about 15 to 20% of this pre-consumer waste ends up trashed and in our landfills. So that pre-consumer waste, even though that it might be invisible to you as the consumer, it does contribute quite significantly to the garment's footprint. So we try and use all the scraps that we can to try and turn them into like little creative products. So right now we're making scrunchies and headbands out of those scraps. And it's just an example of how we're constantly looking at all the different aspects of our product supply chain to try and maximize the efficiency of use and minimize the environmental footprint. So basically, where do we go from here? To us, repurposing plastic bottles is a good solution to a really bad problem. So if in our ideal world, it sounds counterintuitive, but the dream would be to run out of plastic bottles to turn into recycled polyester altogether. We would love that. We would love to not have this resource to divert into these products. But unfortunately, right now, the supply and demand is just, there's so much supply of these bottles and so little demand to turn them into something new or to eradicate them altogether. So for now, while that supply and demand is so imbalanced, we feel pretty good about diverting these resources and using them into new products. But the dream is to hopefully reduce those altogether and get rid of plastic bottles. And then at that point, we'll absolutely pivot to something different if we haven't already. And then the other thing we're working really hard on is the death aspect to try and, so right now we're able to recycle obviously the PET bottles into a polyester garment without any degradation of quality. But what we're working on is trying to recycle now the garments from garment to garment without degradation of quality. And there's quite a few hurdles to jump over with that, but we're working really hard on trying to get a take-back program going. So we could basically close the entire loop on our product. So then we would be diverting that bottle and turning it into a product that then lives on forever. And we can hopefully eliminate the death altogether. So then also on our website, I was kind of high level on a lot of this, but if you want to dig in a little bit further to each of the environmental life cycle analysis and kind of a little bit more about how we decide or we determine the birth, life, and the death of the product, we have product tabs. We have tabs on the product page called Environment, and it basically, you can click on a little link and a pop-up will show with the birth, life, and death, and basically our evaluation of why we chose to do things the way that we did. So reducing an environmental impact is obviously extremely complicated, whether it's yours or mine or a company's environmental impact. It's a never-ending process. And while that process is always changing and evolving, we've decided that our commitment to it will never. So we hope to improve in the future, and we hope to do that by open dialogue with our customers and our community, and we'll see where the future takes us. So with that, any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll pass it back. I hope that didn't take too long. I could talk about this for hours.
Awesome. That was great. Oh, we have a question. So where are your garments manufactured?
Great question. So we have actually tried manufacturing a lot of different places. We started manufacturing, I actually started manufacturing. When we first started, I was sewing all of our leggings. That was the first product that we launched. We had a really tight hold on things, and we wanted to keep our supply chain as small as possible and as tight as possible. But we quickly learned that that wasn't sustainable and that I couldn't keep on sewing leggings for 18 hours a day. So we started looking for manufacturers, and we tried out maybe 5 different ones in Miami. We tried a few in California, one in New York, and we just weren't finding the quality that we expected. So we met a family who actually was having the same issue, and they started their own manufacturing facility in Guatemala. So the nice part about Guatemala is it's just a 2-hour flight from here. So carbon footprint wise, it's a pretty small distance for our products to travel, which we felt pretty good about. It's going less of a distance than it would if it was coming from New York. And then we're able to go down and visit whenever we want. We usually go like 3 or 4 times a year, and we work super closely with them, and we're obsessed with them. They're the best. So.
Awesome. Anything else? Anyone have any questions for any of the presenters that spoke? I can give it a minute, but while we're waiting on that, if anyone has anything, I'll just say a couple of the resources that, again, are going to be emailed to everyone. So kind of just reiterating what everyone has said, all of our panelists talking about, you know, the bureaucracy of needs and just shopping. So using what you already have, that's a great little tool as well. Swapping, thrifting, supporting secondhand, you know, respecting the resources that have already been put into products and, you know, using them and purchasing them. And then also supporting ethical, slow fashion businesses that use those recycled materials and upcycling and all of those good words. So that's just like something to think about. And so we have a couple of like little like next steps kind of things. So we're actually partnering with Waterlust. If you want to purchase from them, there's a link that, again, we'll be sending to everyone. I believe it's just like waterlust.com/DFO, and we will be receiving 25% of the proceeds, which is great. You know, another one of their initiatives to support nonprofits and research, all in that same environmental world. Also, we're having a Debris Free Oceans merchandise sale that's coming up. So actually, a lot of our t-shirts, I think from the beginning, they were either like thrifted and then screen printed on, or, you know, either 100% cotton or I think like different like bamboo cottons as well. And we're planning on getting new merch. So we're having a discounted sale on September 24th and 25th. So you can stay tuned for that. And I can also drop everyone's Instagram handles maybe in the chat, and you'll also get these with the email. But if anyone has any questions, oh, Elizabeth has one. This could be for any of the panelists. So where's the best place to put clothing that wouldn't be good for swaps or donations to others? So like damaged high school t-shirt with her name on it or anything like that. I think, Colleen, I don't know if you want to take this one.
I'm afraid to talk or do anything right now, but for those, I actually know that a lot of the, I don't know if for t-shirts, well, maybe t-shirts, but a lot of the animal shelters will actually accept garments because they usually accept like sheets and blankets and things of that sort because they need stuff for incoming animals. And otherwise, what I would recommend, I don't know that there's an exact place to do that right now. There was something on Miami Beach, but I don't want to put it out there because I don't think they're a reliable source. But what I would recommend is instead of like buying dust rags or things of that sort, or if you're sending out packages, or even during the holidays, instead of using wrapping paper and just throwing that away, wrap your gifts in maybe, even if they're like a little holy, like cut out the holy parts, and you could wrap your gifts in those fabrics too and make really cool bows. Or like Laura was saying, that they use all the extra leftover scraps. Like you can just find other creative ways, not saying that everyone has the time to do all that, but I would recommend actually reusing them, or finding a lot of the extra stuff that we have left over. I mean, if there's buttons on it, I can take it. If there's zippers, I can reuse it in our workshops, because that's actually what a lot of your stuff, particularly Elizabeth, has already gone to, reusing the buttons and things of that sort to then make sewing kits, which we then used at UThrift, or at with UThrift, to do a sewing class. So either that, or find an artisan friend that can reuse things like that. Like a lot of the times when I have leftover fabric, we'll actually go to Miami Fashion Institute and give them dead stock fabric or extra things like trims or buttons that they can always use, and students definitely appreciate, because that shit's expensive, or that stuff is expensive. But yes, so yeah, I hope that gives you a little bit of a better idea of what you could do with those types of things. Oh, and also, if you need to clean your floors, get the Cuban mop. Use your extra t-shirts to put on the end of the Cuban mop. That's all.
Love all those ideas. That was great. So now, if everyone feels comfortable and still wants to stay on to play the Kahoot, completely understand if everyone's just a little bit frazzled. But we still have the Kahoot.
Yeah, I was gonna say we have a quiz, but it requires a screen share, and I don't know if that opens up the door to the dark web for these Zoom bombers. So there's a chance that happens, but I feel like we could maybe try.
We actually have another question before, maybe. So recommendations of places to buy sustainable fabrics. Oh, I think we have some. Anyone wants to take that?
Way to go, Carl. I don't know if Laura has anything, but sustainable fabrics are sometimes hard to come by and often costly. So it's Caitlin, do you have a particular use? Because if you ever need dead stock, which, does anyone know what, besides the speakers, everyone knows what dead stock is? No? Okay. Dead stock is just like I was talking about, having all the bigger companies buy all this fabric. Instead of them buying maybe 200 yards, they buy 500 yards because it's a better price. And so they only use 200, and then there's extra left over. That's the dead stock fabric. So actually having dead stock fabric, which if you need some, I have tons of, just message me. You don't need to buy any. You can always buy dead stock fabric that is left over, or also support like local places like downtown Miami. We used to have such a thriving fashion community here. It's slowly growing again, but there's a lot of really cool like old mom and pop shops that are downtown Miami. Go during the day to Lean to Fabrics, talk to Ruby. She has fabrics there. I wouldn't say it's like the full selection that you could possibly get in all the world, but if you want to be more on the eco-conscious side, I would say at least start with dead stock. Or also in upcycling, grab stop by UThrift or your local secondhand store and buy something that's really large, and then just use that fabric to cut it down to whatever you need. So hope that helps.
I can jump in there too. I'll echo the dead stock fabrics too, because that's obviously, I think, the primary place that you should look. But I've found a lot of places just through Instagram, honestly. There's a place called Blackbird Fabrics that I like a lot. They use a lot of just like really nice quality, some nice natural stuff, some eco-friendly items. And, if you click on one, then you can see the suggested, and that'll just take you there on and on. But I think just looking for a lot of small companies, like Colleen was saying, because then they're not going to overbuy and the fabric's not going to go to waste.
Awesome. All right, thanks so much everyone for those questions. So are you guys for the Kahoot? Can we get like thumbs up of at least the people showing their screens?